Chapter 6. Midnight Rendezvous. Thin moonlight bathed the hill in a watery light. On the crest stood the tactical gate, the shadow of its triform arch against the stars. A small encampment and perimeter surrounded it, and a pair of soldiers patrolled, their eyes glinting cat-like from night vision magic. A small tent was pitched on the edge of the perimeter, with a shield prominently displaying the coat of arms of the champion of Romitu. Two figures stood in the shadows nearby.
"That's what we know,"
said the shorter of the two figures. His hood was thrown back, leaving his head visible, and the rest of his body cloaked in thick, shimmering shadows. The dwarf spymaster stroked his beard and considered the half-elf. Sir Valkyr looked down formally upon the dwarf.
"Thank you most kindly,"
he omitted the sir. The dwarf was not officially in the armed forces, so it was not strictly necessary.
"I will endeavor to use the opportunity to glean the information you desire. Within, of course, the limitations of protecting Magistus."
Of course,
said the dwarf.
"That, of course, is preeminent. At least as long as your patron so directs you."
A wry smile passed Sir Valkyr's lips. He nodded.
"I assure you, if that were to change, you would have full notice and I would return Magistus to safekeeping before taking up any new duties."
The dwarf nodded in his turn. There was silence a while. Coral continued more quietly.
"I know it makes you uncomfortable not to know the entire motives of all of the players in the field. It gives me pause, as well, to not see the full plan of my patron. From her character, though, I am assured of her good intentions."
The dwarf pulled his beard.
"It is not difficult to project the facade you want someone to see. It's a skill like any other. She's had plenty of time to learn."
"And I respect that, as a professional, you know the heights to which that skill can raise."
Coral squatted down lower, bringing his eyes down to the level of the dwarf.
"You've moved amongst the high and low society of Romitu. You've run interference for those seeking the royal presence for both beneficial and self-serving purposes."
Coral thought for a moment, composing himself.
"With the recent upheavals, there's no shortage of people, newly come into wealth, striving for attention. They strut and parade like peacocks waving their plumage so all can see they are wealthy and thus, they presume, important."
The dwarf followed the conversation intently, but did not nod or give acknowledgement.
"And then there are those from old families. Whether current events have left them further enriched or destitute, they carry themselves the same. Their accoutrements are well made, well fitted, and of high quality. They carry themselves with confidence, not arrogance. They do not seek to impress, because they've lived their lives assuming they will impress. I've seen you observe. You are a professional at telling the difference."
At this the dwarf nodded.
"My patron carries herself with the bearing of someone of such immense power, that they no longer are even aware of that power, or the gulf it puts between them and others. She just assumes it as her mantle, with no effort expended to project it. She impresses because she does not try to impress."
Coral shook his head.
"As you have studied, you know the elfin language is not just verbal. With all that time on their hands, body language and gesture form an integral part of their grammar. Shades of that linger amongst the half-bloods, and I am sensitive to it, although most of it passes over my head. Every glance, every nod. Just the way she stands. My patron shouts her stature without even trying."
The dwarf nodded again.
"But, as you have acknowledged, I have made a study of gesture and portrayal. I have circulated, as you say, and blended in with high and low. What she projects is a skill that can be learned."
"I have seen you in action,"
said Coral levelly.
"You present a most impressive facade. Everything you say is possible. She may, indeed, not have our best interests foremost. But if that is the case, and she is willing to go through this much effort to deceive us to her ends, then I fear all the forces we could bring to bear could not deflect her."
"That is my fear too,"
he replied. Coral stood up and laughed quietly.
That relieves me.
The dwarf looked skeptically at him.
No, really. I do not say these things to try to convince you of her honorable intentions. Your job, in protecting the queen we both serve, is to look for the hidden daggers, to trust no one, and to advise her accordingly.
He touched the dwarf's shoulder gently.
My job is out in the open. And, as such, my duties are not just physical protection, but the projection of protection. I am a flamboyant, visible example not just of her protection, but of those who protect her. Because the light is on me, it is part of my duty to be more honorable than pragmatic, more noble than practical, to set a standard that others will be held to, and thus raise the quality of all those protecting her. I cannot guard her back because I must stand in front of her, and not behind her. That's what you do. You are my counterpart. You operate from the shadows. You look for hidden meaning behind kind words, the feints behind the noble gestures, the poison in the cup. And, for that, you bear the brunt of suspicion yourself, the lack of trust, the disapproval of court.
He removed his hand and smiled wryly down at the dwarf.
I am luckier in that my job is one that seems to impress people. But know this, I value what you do and consider it as important as what I do. I want you to distrust those I trust. I say these things to explain my own actions, not to guide you in yours.
Coral gave him a saluting gesture. The dwarf bowed slightly.
Thank you for your words. I will bear them in mind.
From you I'll take faint praise,
said Coral, smiling.
But now I must take your leave, and bid you good night.
They both moved off in their separate directions.